614 Productions presents The Not So Neutral Zone, a podcast for armchair enthusiasts by armchair enthusiasts. The opinions expressed on this show are those of the participants and in no way represent those of any sports organization, league, team, or athletes therein. We're your host. I'm Jacob USFL Smith. And this is David
CFL.
No, I was going to go Arena League Trexler. You have this thing for the Arena League, so...
Not anymore, not since they went down.
What are they down to, 4 teams?
4, yeah. Very exciting.
Alright, well, I think we discussed this a little bit last week. Something that would be nice to talk about. We're going to talk about expansion. There's been, major sports leagues, really only, the Golden Knights in Las Vegas? I can't think of who was before then.
Well, you constantly have, the MLS is constantly expanding, contracting, back and forth. But, I'd say, if you count it, I don't know how they're working it, but the Charlotte Hornets, Charlotte Bobcats, New Orleans Hornets, Pelicans kind of expansion redraw was probably the last major one. Yeah, I'm kind of not hearing much over here. Maybe it's because I'm further from the mic this time.
Alright, better?
Yeah, that'll work.
Alright, well, I guess first we should talk about some major cities that don't have certain franchises. I know you had a few on your list that didn't have a major franchise, whether football. Let's start there.
I'll start from the lower end of the deal.
Okay.
I think the lowest city I looked up was Des Moines, Iowa, which for some reason they've had arena teams, but nothing major. Then you got Boise, Idaho, which nearest team is Seattle. So a team there would give the market a better, the team's not a wider margin, but another area. I don't know how good they'd be with football, but I looked at Omaha, Lincoln, Nebraska, Albuquerque, New Mexico. I scratched Louisville off my list because they're so close to Cincinnati. Then you got Hamilton and Winnipeg, Canada. All of those cities pretty much have a population less than Buffalo, which has the Bills, but like Hamilton has a Canadian football team. Winnipeg has an NHL and a Canadian team, so they're up there in population too.
To backtrack a little bit, when you're talking about Boise, I've never been there, obviously, but I think they're far enough inland. They probably don't share a lot of the same culture, and it'd be interesting to see who they really cheer on, if anybody. I mean, obviously they got the college there, but I don't feel like they would be strong Seattle fans. I think they would be more of a Denver fan, the same kind of Midwest attitude, mountains, all that.
Another city that's interesting on this list, they're bigger than Buffalo, but I do not see them getting a team because of the state's strict religious values is Salt Lake City. I don't see them doing much football on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. What does Utah have? They have the Jazz. I know that.
They have the Jazz, and they have Real, Salt Lake, and MLS. That's it.
You think more teams would want to expand there? Maybe it is because of the religious aspects.
Yeah, especially because of how conservative they are about alcohol and stuff there. So,
yeah,
that's going to be a drawback. They have college teams there, though, but...
What's the big college there?
Utah and Utah State. One of them is where Steve Smith from the Panthers went to college. So it's not like they're not they don't have talent in the state as far as sports, but
You
they're
think
going
that,
to gravitate towards either the California teams or Colorado, Arizona team.
you think they would get more? Because didn't they host the Olympics? They hosted the
in Salt Lake
Olympics.
City.
Winter Olympics. Yeah, I remember those. That's been a while.
Now, here's an interesting one on the list also. I don't know that they would expand there, but Raleigh. Raleigh's got the Hurricanes, and it would be interesting to see North Carolina have two teams. One that they don't share with another state. But interesting on the list also is Edmonton and Ottawa in Canada. Both have a hockey team and a Canadian football team.
That's when you start talking about like NFL expansion. Why they don't really talk much about Canada, because CFL is, I mean, obviously it's second to hockey up there, but it still is kind of a big deal. It's more their, I'm not sure when their season runs, but it's more of their warm weather sport than hockey, which is going to be their cold weather sport.
Obviously, too, when you start talking about Canada, you're going to be looking at dome stadiums versus open roof up there.
It's true.
And
I mean, 2 years that the Vikings had to play outdoors? That was rough. The emergency game they had to play there. Favre's last game as a Viking?
I think so.
Where he got crushed into the frozen tundra. Yeah. I watched that game. I think it was on a Tuesday night.
The next team I got on the list, or city, is in 2016 it was rated the 41st most populous city in North America. They have the Grizzlies, and they had the Memphis Showboats in USFL. Was Memphis? That's where Reggie White played before he came to the NFL. I don't see them getting a team because Tennessee, they've got the Titans in Nashville. But then you got the next city on the list. They've shown they can host teams. I don't know how willing teams like Dallas Dallas because there's no other team near them. But Oklahoma City would be a good option.
I think
unless you award a team to St. Louis, Oklahoma City would be a good option because of the proximity.
Yeah, and like Oklahoma City and Memphis, they're not far off Jacksonville as far as population. The thing with Memphis, they hosted the Titans. Well, they were the Tennessee Oilers for the 1 year they were in Memphis. So I'm not sure. Tennessee would probably try to block that as far as football goes. Tennessee would try to block that based on that's their territory.
Yeah, I don't see Tennessee picking up a second team.
And then Oklahoma City, that's a hard one. You used to have, the Rams and the Chiefs kind of own the middle of the Midwest, and then you got Denver taking up big swaths of it. Then Oklahoma City's just far enough south where you start talking about the Texas teams, specifically Dallas. That is an interesting option because that's a rather large metropolitan area to only have just the Thunder.
I didn't consider Topeka either in my list because Kansas City, I believe, plays in Kansas City, Missouri, not Kansas. Because there's Kansas City, Kansas,
I know.
and Missouri.
They're split by the river there.
So it's kind of, if they play in Missouri, yeah, I could see Kansas get a team. Now, the next one on this list is another Canadian city, and they've got the Flames and Stampeders as Calgary, but I'm kind of overlooking them because I want to go to the city that's in between Nashville. Well, basically, it would fit perfect in the AFC South just because of the three cities that border it as far as population. Jacksonville's got less of a population than it does, but Nashville and Indianapolis are above it in population is Milwaukee. Again, with that one, you got Green Bay. But if plenty of people in the state say, yeah, we'd love another team, Milwaukee would be a good option. I mean, they got the Brewers, they got the Bucks, but I think that city may not be a football fan. They may just say, well, no, we're going to keep our loyalty with Green Bay. They're our guys.
Well, then you also got Chicago to the south. Chicago's not far. So that one's one of those right on the border of territories. I'm not sure exactly.
Not to mention, you got the Vikings also in that market kind of too. It's close proximity because the NFC North is a close.
If you want to, if you want to expand a little bit more, you've got Detroit over in Michigan.
That's why I included Des Moines, Iowa on my list because it's a little outside of the NFC.
It's kind of in a dead zone for teams. That is an interesting thought.
See, with Iowa, a lot of people said, it's not a big sports area, but, I mean, obviously NASCAR can argue that because the Iowa NASCAR races get a lot of attendance. Same with Kentucky is another place that people said, I don't see it. We're more a basketball area. We're not big racing, but it works, especially with the event that's going on today, the Kentucky Derby.
Oh, I didn't know that was today.
Yeah, I saw a thing on Yahoo.
It's only fun when there's a horse that really runs away with it.
Now, going back to Salt Lake City, there is an argument in favor of them getting a football team.
Okay.
Real Salt Lake Soccer Stadium can be used for football also, which leads me to the next team on my argument. Florida's got 3 teams. What's the chance Ohio could add a third in Columbus with the Blue Jackets and one of the oldest MLS teams, the Columbus Crew, or now they're called the Columbus Crew SC. It could certainly hold. I think it could hold a football team. I mean,
that is
given the other 2 franchises in the city aren't real successful, especially with Cleveland. You'd have a team because most people in Columbus, I believe, gravitate away from the 2 Ohio teams more towards Buffalo.
That one is interesting because Ohio is like the birthplace of the NFL. I mean, you've got the Hall of Fames there. You've got 2 historic franchises that have had their struggles. So I think adding a franchise there, it won't happen because of the 2 teams that are already there. But it would be hypothetically interesting.
Now, one city that doesn't currently have an NFL franchise already knows they're getting one is Las Vegas. So I kind of skipped over them and go to a city that me and you both, before we started recording, agreed they're not getting a franchise. It's Sacramento.
Yep.
Because it's just... Now, California, later on we'll get to it and argue for them, but we know Oakland's going to be a topic of conversation that we could see getting a franchise kind of in like what Baltimore did when they got the Ravens, or however you want to look at that, and Houston getting one. But I don't see Sacramento getting one.
Yeah, how many California teams we got right now?
3 before Oakland moves. No, 4.
4 currently. But
Raiders.
basically the Rams came in and the Raiders are leaving, so...
Now, the next city on the list is one that people have been advocating for, I'd say, decades. Back when Carolina, when Charlotte and Jacksonville got their teams, but we got Portland. They got the Trailblazers. They got the Portland Timbers in soccer. So they by default already have a color scheme for the team. But they had the USFL team, the Portland Breakers. I think Portland would definitely be on top, one of the top 5 on my list for a franchise.
Just to give it some more legitimacy for that claim, the Portland metro area is more populous than the Pittsburgh metro area, the Vegas metro area, Cincinnati, Kansas City, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Nashville, Jacksonville, and New Orleans, Buffalo, and I'm sure I'm missing somebody.
Now,
It's also one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in the U.S.
On this list, if I were awarded a franchise, and if the NFL came to me and said, "We want you to found a franchise," where would you put your city? I take Portland, and I already have an idea for a color scheme. I would go forest green and fluorescent yellow, and model my team's colors after Oregon Ducks.
Mm-hmm.
Just because that's when you think Oregon, my first two thoughts are the Trailblazers and the Oregon Ducks. And I don't know about you, but that's so far out of all the teams we covered, that's the only one I can actually pop in my head and come up with a team color already. But, to an extent, like what I was saying before we started recording, with the Panthers, the Bears, and who was the other team I said that modeled their uniforms after a college?
Oh, God, I can't remember.
But, it happens very commonly around sports leagues. They model their colors after teams around there. Or, in the case of the New Orleans NBA team, when they renamed the team, everybody say, "Why Pelicans? State bird." Kind of like why the Arizona Cardinals are the Cardinal, even though the state bird is not a Cardinal. When they were in Chicago and they changed their name to the Chicago Cardinals, it was the state bird. When they moved to Missouri, it was fitting because they were the Cardinals also. And it's kind of one of those fitting things that, name it after. But I think their state animal is actually the beaver, which is Oregon State's mascot. Now, next on the list, Jacob, is the city that was rumored to be getting the Raiders before Vegas got them. San Antonio. Another city. And yes, I would say yes, give them a franchise also. But now, interesting enough, they did have a USFL team also called the Gunslingers. Given today's pop culture, which is something that we agreed doesn't get talked about on the show, Gunslingers would not be the name. I would call them something. I'd get permission from Jerry Jones. Can we use your old arena football name? The San Antonio Desperados.
Yeah, I think this is the top city. This is basically the top city in the U.S. That's deserving of a franchise. When you had the Saints that couldn't play in the Superdome for a year, and they went and played out there. I understand that where the pushback would come from. It come from Jerry Jones. He wouldn't want another team taking up his territory. If you're in Texas, you're either a Cowboys fan or you might be a Houston fan if you just happen to be in that area.
What I would do there, and see, actually, I believe Jerry Jones, Mark Davis had went to Jerry Jones and said, San Antonio showing some serious interest in the Raiders. Jerry was ready to sign off on this. So, I think because, first and foremost, Jerry Jones is a businessman and not one of the dumbest guys in the NFL. I see him seeing it as, hey, it's more money for my state. I don't, it wouldn't be like what happened whenever, not him, but the owner of the Cowboys at the time opposed the Redskins move from Boston to Washington, D.C., because the funny thing in there was, I don't know if you're aware, but the owner of the Boston Braves, Boston Redskins, whatever they were called at the time, when they wanted to move, the owner of the Cowboys tried to block it. At the time, the owner didn't have restricted rights to the Dallas Cowboys fight song.
Oh yeah, I've heard this one.
They bought the rights to the fight song and said, "We'll let you have the rights back if you let us move." So they're like, "Go ahead and move." And that's why there's such a heated rivalry between the Cowboys and Redskins to this day.
Let's see. There's another good one about the Packers and Bears, and I can't remember who did what. I think it was the Packers. The Packers signed a player that the Bears wanted, and it was a college player. This was before they had any kind of agreement with colleges, so that was against the NFL rules at the time. So the Bears got the Packers kicked out of the league so they could sign this player, and then immediately after helped get the Packers back into the league. So it's like, the greatest rivalries are the ones that they just don't know how to quit each other.
Well, you also in that instance is that bitter rivalry when the Indianapolis Colts roll into Baltimore, or when the Ravens go to Cleveland. You've got those intense rivalries. Now, here's your next team on the list, and you said you weren't so sure about this in the same argument about California, but they have a higher population than Jacksonville in Orlando.
Yep.
Now, they also have Orlando City SC soccer, so stadium's already there. And a lot of times, I think that's what they look at when they go to decide where's potential landing spots for soccer now, is they want to go to cities where there's football stadiums, and so they don't have to lease as much property.
Now, there's obvious concerns with that about Tampa and Miami and Jacksonville not wanting another team put right in the middle of it. But I want to entertain it just a minute. Entertain that thought. Would they have a lot of homegrown, fan support? I don't think so. But imagine, with all the theme parks around Orlando, imagine how many people fly into that town every year to go to Disney World or, Universal Studios and all that. Well, now you've got something else they can do when they fly down there.
Not to mention, just think how big the possibilities are there.
If people are already traveling there.
With the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the main thing. When they award a city a Super Bowl is, what do you have around the city that we can do if people come in for a week and they're not at the game yet? Loads of money for the city.
Disney World would make a lot of money. They would probably partner with the NFL to promote that. Not to mention,
how many players would play for this Orlando NFL franchise? And I'm going to go ahead and give them a nickname. I don't know if you ever watched the show, or you're not old enough to remember the show, but Coach.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
On the show, Craig T. Nelson's character, Hayden, was coach of the University of Minnesota. He got the opportunity to become head coach of an NFL franchise called the Orlando Breakers. And so, even there's a joke there that, they had an NFL franchise. And, yeah, it would be crazy, because then if I'm playing for Orlando, I would be like, they'd be like, what are you doing in off season? Going down the road to Disneyland? I mean, kids. Because with the football players' contracts, Disneyland would be like...
World. It's Disney World there.
I always get them mixed up. But, you're like, yeah, I'll just go down the road. Yeah, it's not far from here. You got Universal Studios, SeaWorld.
Oh, yeah, I forgot SeaWorld. And I've been there.
Years ago.
Yeah, when they still had orcas. It was like early 2000s. I was little.
Now, our next city is one that a lot of people might go, I don't know. And they lost their basketball team to Memphis, but they have the Canucks in hockey, the Lions in the CFL, and the Whitecaps in hockey and soccer is Vancouver. Now, in the same vein that Seattle has the Seahawks and they have the Sounders, that shows that this area, because, think about this for a second, because we argued about Portland getting a team. Portland has a soccer team. Seattle has a soccer team. Vancouver has a soccer team. I could see all three of them having a hockey or a football team as well. And because it's such a big area there that people's not going to want to hassle themselves to get a passport just to go across the border to watch Seattle when they can stay in their own city and watch Vancouver. Plus, I think they had one of the Olympics there recently.
Yes, they hosted the Winter Olympics. That was the point I was just going to make. So they've got the infrastructure there to, with transportation and hotels. And I know pre-show, I was talking about how that's a lot of Seattle territory. But I think it could make a lot of sense, especially, okay, so the fourth preseason game is always the same teams playing each other. The Panthers always play the Steelers. I think the Cowboys play the Cardinals. I'm not sure who the Falcons always play. I think the Giants and the Jets always play, which is funny because they swap being the home team each year.
One of the most interesting things is that right there, because I remember when they built the stadium, they said they would have the most unique lighting system of any stadium. It would be blue when the Giants were home team, green when the Jets are home, and red when it's somebody else, like the Super Bowl. And interesting enough, I remember one year they had I think it was a Sunday night game or a Sunday afternoon game. Giants were home team, and somehow the NFL had messed up the scheduling. The Jets were the Monday night team. The grounds crew spent all night changing the end zones over from Giants to Jets, and when they played the game, you couldn't even see the blue from where the Giants had it. But yeah,
they had to be careful not to disturb Jimmy Hoffa when they did that.
What I think would be funny too with Vancouver having a team and Seattle having a team, or even because what you could call it is Battle of the Border or something like that. And it'd be fun. It'd be like a fun little thing between, like Canada and the United States could have like a little argument.
They'd probably put them in different conferences, but I think it could work. Do your fourth preseason game every year, swap home teams, and you could see them every year. And then, of course, every 4 years they'd play in the regular season. So that would be interesting. I'm not sure how ready Canada is for an NFL team, and it would probably have to be. Well, it wouldn't have to be a dome stadium. It's not that far north, and it's right on the Pacific. I don't think it would have to be a dome stadium.
I would do retractable for Vancouver. Some of the other Canadian cities, I would say roof.
Mm-hmm.
But there I'd do dome, just specifically.
Retractable,
now,
yeah.
Most of the CFL teams, I believe, play outdoor, but they
wrap their season up. Yeah, they wrap their season up earlier. So, but that is a good one. That's a good one. And before we got talking, I kind of had it written off of my list.
Pretty good lobbyist for a team, I guess. Okay, the next city.
Mr. Trexler goes to New York. You're in Goodell's office. Make your pitch.
Can I pitch it to somebody else?
No.
Because I kind of have an agreement with the NFL fans the way it was at the draft. Roger, I can't call you Mr. Goodell. I'm going to call you Roger. But now the next two cities we're talking about would be locks, I feel, for a franchise. The first one just lost their franchise. They have the Cardinals in baseball and the Blues in hockey is St. Louis. Obvious. And if you're trying to land a franchise for St. Louis, who's the number one celebrity you bring in to help you pull to get a franchise? Nelly. The man has been vocal that he would do anything to land a franchise there. Not to mention, just think.
Would he make good music again?
I don't know. I say, you land a franchise in St. Louis, and Nelly's responsible, retire the number 23 jersey. His jersey in the longest yard. But yeah, St. Louis, I don't even think we need to debate that one.
No, that one's... The only debate I could make against it would be that the fans would be jaded from the Rams leaving and wouldn't want to fall in love with another team. But I think if you put like either an expansion or somebody move there, that if they had some success, especially immediate success, that they would very quickly establish a fan base there.
The other thing I would say is if you're going to award a franchise, going forward,
mm-hmm.
there needs to be a rule in place that the franchise can't leave for so many years. You got to give us at least a decade guaranteed. You cannot move. Kind of like, players get those contracts where it's 4 years, 5th year option. Guaranteed 10 years, 5-year option, kind of like what the Jets have with the stadium deal.
Yeah, I think if there's going to be an expansion or someone moving to St. Louis, that it's going to have to be within the next 10 years because you're going to start getting fans that go to other teams. But I don't know. St. Louis is, they almost landed the Patriots when the Patriots were going to move. They almost landed them, and everyone in New England should thank Robert Kraft for stopping that and then purchasing the team because now they've got 5 Super Bowl rings. So,
not to mention this might not be a popular opinion among anybody that listens to this, but one of the best owners in the NFL.
Yeah.
Because you lump him, Mark Davis, Jerry Jones, and I want to say McNair that owns Houston.
Mm-hmm.
You basically have the richest owners in the NFL right there. Those are your power guys.
Yeah.
But see, again, I'm going to lump the next team in with St. Louis only because they lost to Los Angeles also for the team that nobody wanted, the Chargers, with San Diego, which so far they're the biggest city we've talked about so far. And all they've got is the Padres. But again, the problem is the city working with ownership about stadium. They got a stadium, so, refurbish it.
Yeah, you could be like, let's see. You've had a lot of teams build new stadiums lately, but we haven't talked a whole lot about the teams that have refurbished their stadiums. The biggest one that comes to mind is Miami, where they spent, so many $1 billion to renovate that stadium. They didn't have to play somewhere else. They didn't have to move somewhere else. Build a stadium 20 miles outside city limits, San Francisco, and expect people to drive there. They just renovated it and called it a day. So yeah, I think that could work. The only issue with San Diego is an issue really with the city itself. It's a Navy town. You've got a lot of transplants. They bring their own, team loyalty with them. And then, of course, you've got Los Angeles just up the road now has 2 teams. I know San Diego residents will say that they don't like Los Angeles and vice versa. But I don't think the NFL would want a 3rd Southern California team.
All right. Well, let's go back across the northern border. Not of California, not of SoCal, but the Canadian border with Montreal. They used to have a baseball team. They have the Canadians who have been there, and it is the 2nd winningest sports franchise in North America, only to the Yankees. They got the Montreal Impact, which is new, and the Montreal Alouettes, and I believe I said that right. So I think Montreal could be a good, viable franchise. If Toronto doesn't get one, Montreal. The only problem there, Montreal's in a French-speaking portion of Canada, so you got that language barrier too. But you'd have bilingual players, and it'd be interesting to see, how many players come into that city that know how to speak French and could appeal to the crowd.
Yeah, Montreal's a good choice. Its location looks like it would be close to like Buffalo, New England. But it's, like you said, it's a French-speaking part, so it's a very different culture. So it's something that could work. I just worry about establishing the fan base, especially something that's an American sport. They have enough trouble dealing with Canadian issues in Quebec, much less an Americanized sport coming in.
Well, the same thing to argue is for any Canadian city is most people are like, well, we're a hockey country.
That's true.
But just about every Canadian city we mentioned has a soccer team, or to the extent of Toronto and formerly Vancouver used to have basketball teams. So they've shown they are not restricted to the stereotypical Canadian sports. Now, are you ready for the next city on the list?
Sure.
This city has a bigger population than Detroit, Seattle, Minneapolis, Cincinnati, Buffalo, Denver, Cleveland, Tampa, Kansas City, Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Green Bay, Charlotte, Las Vegas, Baltimore, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, and Nashville. Now, all those teams I just mentioned, or all those cities I just mentioned, have NFL franchises, but I lumped the entire state into it because of how diehard their football fans are about that University of Alabama program as Birmingham, Alabama area, which formerly had the Birmingham Stallions in the USFL. They've had an arena team. They've had a NFL Europe team or NFL World, whatever you want to call it, there. But I could see Birmingham getting one because we hadn't really talked about too many teams or cities east of the Mississippi or south of the Canadian border.
Obviously, the biggest argument against putting a team in Alabama is the diehard nature of the college fans there. I think if there was, let's say there's an expansion team there, I think they need to make sure some of their late round picks are Alabama players to get them off the ground quickly. Maybe sign a bunch of them as undrafted free agents. I think that's one of those where you kind of have to pander to the fan base. It could work. I don't think it would work. I just don't think there's enough. There's a lot of people. There's just not a lot of money there. You know, I'm not saying Alabama's dirt poor. I'm just saying that it's not one of those metro areas where, you know, you've got like Charlotte, it's a big banking city. You've got New York, which is everything. You know, you've got LA, which is like the epitome of
Hollywood.
Urban sprawl is what I was going to say. But so I don't know how well that would work. But like you said, with University of Alabama, they travel well. They come in, you know, they get loud. They support their team. If an NFL team could build the same kind of base, it'd be something to reckon with.
Again, going back to what I said about St. Louis and bringing in a local celebrity, bring in Nick Saban. If Nick Saban puts his stamp of approval, then they may rally behind it.
Yeah, I think that would probably have to wait till Nick Saban retired. I'm not sure how the NCAA would like him actively supporting an NFL team.
As long as they're not paying him.
As long as no money changes hands, he might lose his NCAA eligibility.
All he'd have to do is just be like, you know, this could be good for us because an NFL team in there means that people are going to want to spend more money in our state.
And yeah, you do have to think about that. You could go Saturday night to go watch the University of Alabama, and then you can go Sunday afternoon to go watch more football. Could work. I think maybe not at an NFL level. I'm not sure. You know, maybe a smaller league, maybe XFL could look in there.
Well, see, XFL's already done it before, and they pretty much said they want to focus on cities that have a franchise now. So I don't see them getting too much attention.
Yeah, that's the tough part. Everyone's going to chase the money. They're not going to chase really, you know, think about it. If you could build that wild fan base, that just fanatic fans, that place could be louder than like Seattle and Kansas City. You build a stadium just right out there where it reflects the sound around, and that place could be loud.
Now, before we move on to the last three cities we got, would you potentially give a city a second franchise?
Oh, let's see. A second franchise. Well, let's break it down a little bit. You've got the largest.
Now, here's one of them that I'm curious about.
Mhm.
That I say that about because technically, New York State has one team, but they have 3 teams named after the state. New Jersey, I don't see getting a third franchise, so I've eliminated them from my thing. Los Angeles, obviously, not going to get another one.
Yeah, I don't think any place gets 3. Obviously, you've got 2 states that have 3 or more teams. You could have 3 with Texas. But if you want to break it down by like metropolitan area, New York City and Los Angeles each have 2 teams. That's the 2 largest U.S. metropolitan areas. The next largest ones might surprise you. It's actually Chicago. I think there's just too much history there with the Bears for another franchise to really establish itself. They've shown that they can equally support 2 baseball teams. So that's one thing.
You could have them. You could put them on the south side with the White Sox.
Yeah. So it could work. I think Chicago would have to be bad for a really long time to establish that. The next one's Dallas-Fort Worth, which is not going to happen because of Jerry Jones. Then you got Houston, which is a young franchise in its own right. You don't want to kill its momentum. This is an interesting one, and I'll actually say that because I think this is a city you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
So that would be
actually next after this current one.
I'll hold that one in my back pocket. But then you got like Washington, Philadelphia, Miami, Atlanta. None of those 4, I think, could support another franchise.
Now, the next city on the list, I actually grouped another one in with it. But they consider it the Bay Area with San Francisco included. But you have Oakland, San Jose. Now, Oakland would be the place to get it. But they have, in that area alone, not counting the San Francisco-based franchises, there's the A's, Warriors, San Jose Sharks, San Jose Earthquakes, all there. Plus, Oakland had, and this could be a potential name for a team there, is the Invaders of Oakland from the USFL. That one's kind of like San Diego and St. Louis arguing for a franchise, beating a dead horse. I wouldn't expand there for 3 years after the Raiders leave, kind of like what they did with the Browns deal. Mm-hmm. But let's go to the city we were both thinking of, Toronto. Toronto, Buffalo area, because Toronto showed they can host games from the Buffalo Bills series there. And plus Toronto was ranked number 9 in 2016 as far as population in North America. So, yeah, I could see Toronto supporting a team because they've got, of every city we've listed, let me go back and double check and make sure I'm not saying this wrong. Aside from New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Denver, Dallas, Philadelphia, Boston, Washington, D.C., Minnesota, they're one of the few places that has a franchise in. Actually, I take that back. They're the only city that we've talked about that has a baseball team, a basketball team, a hockey team, a soccer team, and a Canadian football team. So, yeah, I could see Toronto being a big... All you have to do is assure the Buffalo team there will never be a Buffalo-Toronto home games at the same time. They'll play kind of like what they do with the Jets and Giants. We'll play 8 games away when you're at home. So the scheduling conflict.
I don't think that could. I think that wouldn't work as far as scheduling concerned. But what they could do is say you never have home games at the same time, so they wouldn't both play at home at 1 or at 4. They would say, okay, well, if we're both at home this weekend, you're playing at 1, you're playing at 4. Or you're playing at 1, you're playing Sunday night. You got Sunday night, you got Monday night. I think that could work, where a fan could watch both And I think if you put them in different conferences, and like we talked about earlier with Seattle, Vancouver, you could kind of get a partnership going there where they could play every fourth preseason game. They could split the fan base a little bit.
Aside from the NHL, pretty much the NBA, MLB, and NFL are pretty good about not putting teams in the same cities, in the same conferences.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the realignment of the NHL, they still managed to not have that conflicting schedule because under the new alignment in NHL, the New York Islanders, the New York Rangers, and the New Jersey Devils are all in the same division, I believe, but they don't play each other enough that it kind of conflicts. And this is where I would argue if I was trying to land Toronto a franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo has the Sabres.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Maple Leafs. We still don't conflict. And it could work as long as... It would definitely put the scheduling people on their toes as far as Buffalo, Toronto, all those guys right in that area. Now, the next city is one that it's more of a novelty to play there, and I'm not making fun of the country, but it's kind of like London getting a franchise. Mexico City, they're very loyal to soccer, so it would have to be one team in the country for them to have it, and being close to San Antonio and San Diego also, especially with, you'd have that whole immigration debate mess and stuff. But Mexico City could be a viable option, but I don't think I'd list it as one of my top 8.
Yeah, I think Mexico City deserves a franchise before London. The issues, let's just run down the issues real quick. You obviously have a language barrier, but then you have Mexico is not really known for public funds for private stadiums, so that would be a barrier. You basically have to fund your own stadium. The income per household is not that high. Definitely not high enough where someone would want to touch it. Then you've got the violence, not necessarily in Mexico City itself, but in parts of Mexico. But as shown by the international series games there, they can draw a crowd. And I think a franchise in that city, it'd have to be an owner that's pretty rich on his own and would be like Jerry Jones or whatever, funding their own stadium, making it a big deal. I think they could get a really large following. Now, I don't know if you heard the news. It's been a while, but the last earthquake they had down there. Oh yeah, the area is earthquake prone, but I mean, so is the West Coast.
California.
Yeah, but the last earthquake they had there damaged the stadium, Stadium Azteca. Damaged the stadium that they play the international series games in. So that's kind of put that in limbo. I think they do have an international game planned for this coming season. So maybe they've gotten that damage fixed or on its way. And then some of the pros for having a team there versus London, you don't have that time difference. So you not have as much jet lag. It is still a sizable flight, but you don't have the jet lag. I don't know if you know this, but Mexico City is actually very elevated. So it's like Denver almost. I think it's actually higher than Denver. The place is built on a mountain. I think the mountain's actually old cities. Anyway. So you've got thin air there, but it's not much worse than Denver. I don't think it'll happen. I think they want to target London because of the money there.
Out of all the cities we've talked about, I've narrowed my list down to, it looks like 15 potential cities. Now, I've went ahead and marked off, let me double check, make sure I got it right. Okay, so far I've got 6 cities that I say yes to, hands down, no question. I'm gonna give them a franchise. 2 are Canadian. So if I'm commissioner and I get all 15 of these proposals, I've made my selection on 6 of them, regardless of who ownership is, regardless of who is representing the city to argue it. Obvious choices are going to be San Diego. Oh wow, I missed one. Let me make that 7. I've made 7 choices and I gotta fix it because I'm trying to sort this as we're going. Okay, so my obvious choices locked in. I'm gonna give St. Louis, San Diego, and Oakland another franchise. Also on that note, 2 cities that have been dying for franchises, I'm gonna award them one. I'm gonna award Portland and San Antonio franchises. With the promise to Jerry Jones and the ownership in Seattle that these franchises won't conflict with them at all. So I'm going to say Toronto, Oakland, San Antonio, Portland, Montreal, San Diego, and St. Louis are the 7 guaranteed. Now the list for who gets the next franchise, so far, are you with me on this?
I'm with you on it.
Okay, so for the last franchise, we're going to be narrowed down to Mexico City, Birmingham, Vancouver, Orlando, Columbus, Calgary, Oklahoma City, and Ottawa. Now, so far, we've got 7. Looks like we've got 2 East Coast teams, 2 West Coast, and 2 kind of in the middle of the world, continent. So, would you say no to Mexico? Let's keep the novelty and play a couple games there a year with other teams?
Personally, I would put a team in Mexico City. Now, the proposal would have to be pretty sweet. It'd have to be an owner that could self-finance, stadium, somebody who understands how to work the media down there, I don't think... There's no way that you could take an American billionaire down there and he have success. This would have to be a Mexico billionaire, somebody with ties to get, the government on board, to get the people on board. It's definitely one of the toughest proposals on the whole list, just from a logistics standpoint.
Okay, so to cut time, I'm gonna say no. Let's keep the international series thing going there. Okay, next, no sports franchises in the state. Do you say pass? Do you give thumbs up, thumbs down to Birmingham?
I would with your other 7, if somehow the other 7 were approved, I think Birmingham is a good call.
Okay. Now, would you give... We're going to keep Birmingham as number 8. But we're going to argue, kind of swipe left, swipe right, kind of Tinder kind of thing.
Tinder.
Okay, we've already said we've got our 3 pretty much West, or 2 West Coast guys, franchises. So we're doing basically 2 West Coast, 2 Midwest, 2 East, 2 South, kind of to give every division an equal guy where they're not having to travel. Basically, St. Louis not being a West team, they're going to be a South team. So, do we say yes or no to Vancouver? Now, keep in mind, we've already promised the Seahawks that Portland's not going to interfere with them.
I think you can't do Portland and Vancouver. So if you do Portland, I think that takes Vancouver off the table.
What I would do is say, okay, Seattle, if we're not going to give a team there, how about you and Portland once a year play an international game in Vancouver if we don't give you a franchise? So we're going to keep Birmingham and drop Vancouver? Okay, now, do we give the state of Florida their 3rd franchise in Orlando? We've kind of sweetened the deal with Disney World.
I forgot how much we talked that one up.
Basically, Super Bowl, great opportunities because of location. Now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to work enough time so that we can kind of, which conference, which division gets each team, you know what I mean?
If you said yes to that one, you'd probably have to pull Birmingham. So I'm going to go no. I don't think a fourth team in Florida is a good idea.
Okay, now, going on that, given a state multiple teams, do we say yes or no to Columbus, Ohio?
No.
That was a quick one.
No.
Okay,
there's just too much history with Cleveland and Cincinnati.
I personally am going to turn this next one down, so it's Calgary.
Yeah.
Because I feel two Canadian teams will be a good start, kind of like what NBA did when they expanded into Canada. Now, Oklahoma City.
There's so many good ones.
Well, so far we're down to two. We're down to three teams that's going to either get one or not. With Birmingham, Oklahoma City, and unfortunately, I like the hockey team, but I'm going to say no to Ottawa. So we're down to Oklahoma City or Birmingham gets the final franchise.
I think you'd have to go Birmingham since you've already done St. Louis and San Antonio, the two deserving Midwest cities. I think Oklahoma City just kind of gets left out there.
Now, seeing as we got 20 minutes to tell these teams where they're going to go. Okay, we'll start with Birmingham.
I think that would make a great fit for the NFC South.
Okay, so
do you agree there? I mean, the travel. Think about the NFC South right now. You've got a Florida team, North Carolina, a Georgia team, and a Louisiana team. You put Alabama in there. You've not added anyone traveling too far. I think it works great.
The NFC South is real close knit as far as where their teams go. Now the next one, I'm gonna lump the Canadian teams in together. Montreal, Toronto. I say Montreal goes to the NFC East.
The NFC East?
I mean AFC East.
AFC East. Yeah, the AFC East is kind of spread out. That would kind of suck for the Montreal team having to travel to Miami early in the season. But if they played in a dome, it wouldn't be as bad.
The reason I say that, give them the AFC East, is because of our argument about giving Toronto a franchise. We'll go ahead and knock them out. NFC East to keep them in Buffalo from being conflicted on schedule.
I don't know about East. That's a lot of travel. Because of Dallas. Dallas always throws that one off.
Well, the reason I say that is because there's two teams in the Midwest that I'm not going to put in the North. I want to put one of them in the South.
Okay. Yeah, I think the NFC East makes sense.
Because at the same... Actually, I take that back. We're not going to put Montreal in the AFC East necessarily. Let's hold off on where we're going to put them. Let's go with Oakland's potential franchise. We obviously know they're going west.
It would have to be AFC West. You wouldn't want them and San Francisco in the same conference. Again, you kind of want to split that fan base.
Well, that throws us into a conflict.
Oh, great. I forgot. We got
Portland,
and then we have San Diego, too. That's going to be fun. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we gave 3 West Coast teams a franchise.
Oh, God.
So, because obviously Oakland, Portland, and San Diego would be 3 deserving. So, would you say
Portland to the NFC West? Because it makes sense right now. Oakland to the AFC West. Okay, San Diego to the... Oh, great. Hold off on them. Let's see if they will work out something better.
Montreal goes to one of the North divisions.
I think AFC North would be better.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that.
Now, NFC North would get...
Unless you could get...
Toronto to the NFC North?
Well, you would probably have to convince somebody who currently exists to switch a division. And the most logical choices, even though I don't know their fans would be popular with it, would be either the Colts or the Cowboys switch. Because it's just, well, even to an extent, the Dolphins.
Yeah, the Dolphins don't make a lot of sense where they're at.
Because
How as far as from a location standpoint.
Because could you see moving them to the South where they belong?
The AFC West with Kansas City is a little out of place, but they also have Denver. I mean, it's the Midwest, so the distances are large, but making this difficult.
Okay, obviously we're going to want to put St. Louis or San Antonio in a South division. So San Antonio cannot go to the AFC South, obviously, because of Houston.
Oh, and we already said Birmingham to the NFC South. Move somebody out.
I would not put Birmingham in the AFC East for the simple fact of the Patriots, because you don't want to put that diehard Alabama fan base. Or do you say
swap the Panthers to the NFC East and the Cowboys to the South?
Or you put the Panthers in the NFC East and then you just give the South 2 teams.
Yeah, then you end up with that funky stuff. Like, what was it? Major League Baseball had the one division with 4 teams, and then there was one division with 6 at one point. Then that makes the, like, prior to Houston coming in, all that funky scheduling they had to do.
Indianapolis would not be happy, but we're moving you to
they're getting out of the South.
We're moving you to the AFC North and giving the AFC South 2 teams. So I say
that makes sense.
I say we're going to award the AFC South, St. Louis and San Antonio, because that gives Houston not as far to travel to play one of their teams. Yeah, it's not going to be popular for San Antonio and Houston, but logistically.
Now think about it real quick. So say you took the Colts out of the AFC South. All right, so now you've got Tennessee, Jacksonville, Houston, San Antonio, and what was the other one?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. Your oldest team out of that would be Tennessee, and they've completely changed their brand since they formed. Then you've got the expansion Jacksonville Jaguars and Houston Texans, and these 2 other new expansion teams. It would be interesting.
So that
be a lot of young blood in that division.
So that leaves us with the problem.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do with San Diego?
We still haven't solved that problem. Okay, is there a West division that really... Because you don't want to put San Diego in a division with either one of the LA teams. And you can't really move either one of the LA teams because they're both in the West division of their respective conferences.
It definitely poses an issue with NFL. What would you do? Or do you award franchises based on
division placement? Oh, I definitely don't think that will be a big concern.
Would you potentially see an NFL where they rework off all 8 divisions? Because when Houston came in, I felt Houston should have came to the NFC and Seattle should have stayed in the AFC West, because it just threw everything off, because then St. Louis would have had a closer division rival when they were there.
If you're going to add 4 teams to each conference, you could just as easily create another division. You could bring back the Central title or Midwest. Or I know they would have a hard time figuring out what the name needed to be. But that would be something that would throw everybody into chaos. Everyone would have to move around. And as you know, the AFC North can't actually change that much anyway. Part of the agreement with the Browns is they stay in a division with the Bengals and Steelers. So the only one that can move out of that division is the Ravens.
Well, that's why I say with the North, the two teams that go to the North divisions would have to be close. You could even argue and say, we're going to put, if you hang on with me for a second, follow me on this one.
Oh, good luck with that.
Okay. We rework this, and instead of Toronto going to the NFC East, let's put them in the NFC North.
Okay.
Which,
got me here.
And then instead of Birmingham,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to switch them. Instead of going to the NFC South,
Mm-hmm.
we'll put them in NFC East.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to cause the NFC East to have to travel further south, but realistically, they got to travel to Texas to play the Cowboys anyway. So unless you
Make
could
it a
get the
road
Cowboys,
trip.
unless you could get the Cowboys to switch to the NFC South, it throws your schedule off. And unfortunately for one of our teams, and this is not going to be a popular decision, but regrettably, I'm going to say that Carolina, Atlanta, New Orleans, and Tampa won't be happy with my next call. But Arizona's got to come to the South. Unless you were to somehow create because of the way we've decided this expansion. That's why I didn't realize it when we were talking about it, but unless we decide that, sorry, Oakland, you're stuck with San Francisco as your only franchise in that area, and we move it and we give somebody out this way a team.
That gets tough when you really actually got to sit down and think about how it would work in. I'm sitting here thinking, if you did do 5 divisions of 4 teams in each conference, how would you even work those playoffs? Because you couldn't just have one wild card. I mean, you'd have 11-5. You could have a 12-4 team miss the playoffs, and you definitely don't want that.
There is
You could cut out first round buys. That would give you your 5 division winners and 3 wild cards.
Or mix it up even further.
You could add a week to the playoffs and have more wild card play-ins, but...
Or you have this interesting choice, which NHL did.
Mm-hmm.
We scrap the AFC East, North, South, and West. In both... I said AFC. We scrap all 4 divisions and go to a 2-division in each conference system. Kind of like what hockey and I believe basketball does now. Or we could go back to the old 3. And then you don't have to add, because if you only have 3 divisions again, you don't need 32 teams. If you do 3 divisions, you can just... You don't want... You could go to an odd number in each conference, but it's better if you have even.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you only expanded to 4 teams, go to 36, 18 in each.
6 teams in each division. And then that would make the division alignments a little bit easier.
And with that, then we could say, okay, out of those 8 teams, if we're only going to add 6, who do we scrap? Obviously, we would have to get rid of one of the 3 West Coast teams.
Mm-hmm. San Diego would probably be my chopping block. Sorry.
Well, yeah, because, I mean...
They're the one holding up this whole process.
So let's kind of kick San Diego out, and we're going to just say... Now, we're going to drop the division part, too. Okay, so who do we exclude next? San Antonio, St. Louis, Montreal, Portland, Oakland, Birmingham, Toronto?
Birmingham's probably it's definitely the smallest market out of all of them, so I think that was the one that would get cut.
Okay, so we're down to 6.
Okay.
Obviously, we're going to put Toronto and Montreal. We'll give Toronto to the NFC. We'll give San Antonio to the AFC because...
That keeps them away from Dallas.
Actually, you know what? No. We're going to keep them off the board a minute. We'll give Oakland to the AFC.
Mm-hmm.
Portland will get to the AFC?
Yeah, AFC. Because you wouldn't want them to be with Seattle.
Montreal.
Uh-huh.
St. Louis and San Antonio. San Antonio is the tough one now because you've got Houston and Dallas close.
Well, Houston's not as close as Dallas. I would do AFC for San Antonio.
Which means Montreal and St. Louis will go to the NFC.
Okay. That's definitely doable.
Now, if you award... And what we're going to do is... Sorry to our friends in the North and South.
You're going to make the Central.
We're going to bring back the Central.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're obviously going to send Oakland to the AFC West. We're going to send Portland.
Who do we get Portland to? The AFC?
We'll send them to the West.
Yeah.
Because what we're going to do, Kansas City, sorry.
They go to the Central.
You're going to the Central because it's better for you. Which means St. Louis, you're going to the newly created Central.
Now, where were they at? NFC?
Yeah.
Okay, so that keeps them out of Kansas City.
Okay, so I'm going to say Houston, Indianapolis, Kansas City. Man, that's tough. Okay, obviously.
San Antonio.
Obviously, we're going to say
Jacksonville would go to the East. Tennessee might need to go to the East.
What do we do about these guys? Because unfortunately, Baltimore and Pittsburgh are in the East too.
Oh. Hell.
So it's kind of how do we realign? I don't know.
But we'll have to post something up. We'll have to draw it up and see what our plans were.
Because obviously,
I challenge you. I know you got a lot going on, but I challenge you this week to draw it up. Draw it up and draw up a playoff plan and see. Are we going to operate under the assumption we're adding 6 or 8? Let's do 6. Makes it easier. And we'll come back next week and we'll just post them on the Facebook page, and we'll see what ours look like. You want to go through some honorable mentions real quick? Some cities that we didn't really talk about that because we took them off the board pre-show. I know you talked about Hawaii. Again, that is one that would be great to have a team out there. I don't think they have the population to really support it, but it'd be great to have a team out there. The travel times would be hell, though.
I'm actually going to say my honorable mention is a callback to a recently retired NFL quarterback, because I would love for him to come in and be the announcer for every one of the games, just because I want them to score a touchdown with Peyton Manning announcing for the Omaha NFL team, just so every time they score a touchdown, Omaha, Omaha, Omaha.
Omaha scores. Omaha scores. Yeah, that's not going to happen. And I'm sure people are going to wonder why we didn't talk about London, but both because we both think that London's a bad idea and it's terrible. The travel times. Imagine the London team having to go play one of the West teams on the West Coast. That would be hell, because the West Coast teams normally start at 4. If you had a London team, they'd probably play at 9 every week. This is East Coast times, because you couldn't have them playing at 1. That's too late London time.
Now, one more. I want to kind of give a honorable mention.
Shout out to.
They have nothing that I know of going on around this city, and gonna give a nod to the great Al Pacino on this, and his Coach D'Amato from Any Given Sunday when he left the Miami Sharks to coach the expansion Albuquerque Aztecs.
Yeah. That's one that I was just thinking about a few minutes ago that we hadn't talked about, was something in New Mexico.
I feel they would be a very good choice. I mean,
I think they would make a great choice as a kind of like a Mexico team, but not too Mexican. a compromise decision, because New Mexico has obviously a large Hispanic population. So it could be a great compromise team.
And I still feel that if we go to 8, I definitely want Orlando on the board still. Just because, I feel like Orlando does have a lot more than, say, the teams we picked. Now,
I think Orlando, if for some reason they decided to do a Super Bowl not at a current NFL team's location, Orlando, I understand their stadium's small and it's outdated. Let's just not think about the facilities, the football stadium itself at the moment. the city itself is a great choice because of all the hotels and attractions. A neutral site Super Bowl, that would be a great place just for the facilities, not for the football stadium.
Definitely got to go with Orlando as an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if we take somebody off the board.
Yeah. This was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be.
Always love those.
It was also more challenging than I thought it was going to be.
Always love those out-of-the-box episodes. Definitely got to start doing more of these.
Yeah, I think that's more of our stride. Try to be deep-diving analysis. I just say I don't have time for that.
Now, before we start with, I know the music's getting ready to start, but I want to go one more thing. Next episode, which we will be able to do one more episode before we take a week off, is we're going to talk about our favorite sports movie athletes, not the fictional ones. So go ahead and give us that send-off.
All right, thank you for listening to this episode of the Not So Neutral Zone. Check us out at our Facebook page, our YouTube channel. For David, I'm Jacob. Thank you for listening and have a great week.
And thank you to our one YouTube subscriber.